I never thought an ordinary Saturday morning could turn into something unforgettable. The house was quiet, almost too quiet, with only the steady hum of the fridge breaking the silence. My husband had left early, like he always did, chasing deadlines and long hours, leaving me with a home that felt more like a waiting room than a place of comfort. I tried to fill the emptiness with small chores, brewing coffee, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, folding laundry that didn't really need folding. It was routine, dull, and predictable until I heard the sharp sound of water dripping where it shouldn't. At first, I ignored it, but the drip grew into a trickle, and within minutes I was standing in the kitchen staring at water pooling across the counter and running toward the floor. Panic bubbled inside me. I grabbed towels, pressed them against the faucet, twisted knobs I didn't understand. Nothing worked. My hands trembled with frustration. Alone and with no clue how to stop the flood, I did what most people would do. I reached for my phone. I called my neighbor, hoping she could recommend a plumber. But it wasn't her voice that answered. It was his. Calm, low, almost reassuring.
"She's out," he said.
"But I can come take a look." I hesitated. It felt strange, inviting another woman's husband into my kitchen. Yet the water was spreading faster, and desperation outweighed hesitation. "Please," I replied, "I'd appreciate it." 15 minutes later, he was at my door.
James.
I'd seen him countless times across the driveway, mowing his lawn, carrying groceries, giving a polite nod when our eyes met. We never spoke much, but I knew enough he was steady, reliable, the kind of man who always had the right tool for the job. Today, though, as he stepped into my house with a confident stride, carrying a small toolbox, I noticed something I hadn't before. His presence filled the room in a way that made me suddenly aware of my own breathing. "Where's the trouble?" he asked, his voice casual but carrying an edge of authority. I pointed to the sink, embarrassed by the mess. He crouched down, sleeves rolled above his forearms, exposing strong, steady hands that looked far too skilled for something as trivial as a leaking faucet. As he worked, I found myself lingering nearby, holding the towels he asked for, passing him a wrench when he stretched out his hand. Every small movement seemed charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I told myself it was nothing, just a neighbor helping out. But then his eyes met mine briefly, a glance that lasted a second too long, and I felt a jolt deep inside me, sharp and unexpected. My throat tightened, and I turned away quickly, pretending to wipe the counter. The sound of dripping slowed under his touch, but inside me, something restless began to stir. I had called him to fix a broken sink. I never expected he'd be the one to shake the fragile balance of my ordinary life. And as I watched him work, part of me wondered if the real problem leaking through my kitchen that morning had nothing to do with the pipes at all. He stayed focused on the pipes, the sound of metal clinking against metal filling the small space. I stood a few feet away, pretending to busy myself with the counter, but my eyes kept betraying me. The way his shoulders moved as he worked, the quiet confidence in his hands, it all drew me in more than I wanted to admit. He muttered something under his breath about a worn-out washer, then asked me to hand him the wrench. When our fingers brushed, it was only for a moment, but it felt longer, hotter, than it should have. I pulled back quickly, pretending not to notice, though the warmth lingered against my skin. "Almost got it," he said, leaning deeper under the sink. His voice was casual, but there was something in the tone, something heavier, as though he was aware of the shift between us. I swallowed hard and nodded, even though he couldn't see me. My pulse quickened with each second of silence that followed, as though the house itself was holding its breath. The faucet gave one last stubborn drip before the water finally stopped. He pushed himself upright, wiping his hands on the towel I offered. His shirt clung slightly to his chest, damp from the splash earlier, and I caught myself staring. He noticed, he had to notice, because his lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile before he looked away. "You'll probably need a new part eventually," he said, but his eyes weren't on the sink. They were on me, steady and unflinching. That look unsettled me, because it wasn't neighborly concern. It was searching, lingering, like he was weighing something neither of us dared put into words. To ease the tension, I asked if he wanted water. He nodded, and I poured a glass, careful not to let my hands shake. When I handed it to him, his fingers wrapped around mine briefly. A simple gesture, but one that made my chest tighten. He didn't let go right away, and I didn't pull back. For a second too long, we were caught there, standing in my kitchen, holding the same glass as though it tethered us together. I laughed nervously, trying to brush it off, but the sound felt thin, fragile. "Thanks for coming over so quickly," I said. "Anytime," he replied, his voice lower, almost deliberate. We sat at the small kitchen table, the distance between us far too little for the storm building inside me. Our conversation drifted from the broken faucet to everyday things, work schedules, the endless routines of life. He spoke of long hours and a marriage strained by distance and silence. His honesty startled me, not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, with a vulnerability I hadn't expected. I found myself opening up too, admitting how lonely the house felt when my husband was gone, how the quiet pressed in at night. I had meant to share so much, but his attention was disarming. He listened in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen, in a way I hadn't felt in months. There was a moment, small but unmistakable, when our eyes locked and the air shifted. I told myself to look away, to change the subject, but I didn't. I held his gaze, and in it, I saw not just curiosity, but something deeper, longing, maybe even need. My stomach nodded, equal parts guilt and desire. A drop of water still clung to the edge of the counter from the earlier spill. As I reached for it with a towel, he leaned forward at the same time. Our hands brushed again, and neither of us moved this time. It wasn't accidental anymore. His hand lingered, warm against mine, and I felt the weight of the decision hanging in the silence between us. Something had begun, quiet but unstoppable. And though no words were spoken, both of us knew we had already stepped past the line of harmless neighborly help. The silence between us deepened, heavier than anything the two of us had said. His hand stayed on mine, not forceful, not hesitant, just steady, like he was waiting to see if I'd pull away. I didn't. My heart thudded so loudly, I was sure he could hear it. Something inside me wanted to resist, to remind myself of the vows I'd made, but another part of me, hungry, restless, starved for attention, won out. He moved first, slow enough to give me a chance to stop him. His fingers brushed against my arm, trailing lightly as though testing how far he could go. I should have stood up, laughed it off, created distance. Instead, I stayed rooted in place, caught in the heat of his presence. When his eyes met mine, there was no mistaking what was about to happen. His lips found mine in a kiss that was tentative at first, cautious, as if either of us could still step back. But I didn't step back. I leaned in, meeting him halfway, letting the restraint slip from my shoulders like a weight I'd been carrying for too long. The kiss deepened, hungry now, no longer unsure. His hand cupped the side of my face, the other resting lightly at my waist, and I let myself melt into it, knowing full well what it meant, what it would cost. Every nerve in me screamed both guilt and exhilaration. I thought briefly of my husband, of promises and trust, and for an instant shame burned hot across my chest. But the thought vanished as quickly as it came, drowned out by the pull of the moment, by the warmth and intensity pressing against me. The rational part of me went quiet, only instinct remained. He whispered my name once, as if to anchor us, then kissed me again, harder this time. I felt the table edge against my back, the closeness of his body, and I let it happen. There was no careful line left to tiptoe around, no neighborly excuse to hide behind. We had crossed into something neither of us could undo. The world outside seemed to fall away. No sound of cars, no ticking clock, just the rapid beat of our breaths. His touch moved across my skin with a certainty that betrayed his restraint earlier. It wasn't reckless. It was deliberate, almost reverent, as though he'd imagined this long before today. And the frightening part was how much I wanted it too. Time lost its meaning. Minutes blurred into each other until all that existed was the pull between us, the undeniable truth of what we were doing. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in months, maybe years, and that thought cut me as much as it thrilled me. How had I let myself reach this point? How could I want something that wasn't mine to want? When it was over, the room felt different, charged, like the air after a storm. My chest rose and fell quickly, his breath just as uneven. Neither of us spoke immediately. Words would have broken the fragile thread still connecting us. He finally stepped back, his eyes searching mine, both of us knowing there was no going back. I pressed my hand to my lips, as if trying to hold on to the taste, or maybe hide the truth. He looked at me, conflicted but unrepentant, and I understood. What had happened was wrong, but it was also inevitable. And though no one else would ever know, the memory had already carved itself into me, permanent and undeniable. The room was unbearably quiet once it ended, a silence so thick it pressed down on both of us. My chest still rose and fell sharply, and I could feel the heat of his touch lingering on my skin long after he'd stepped away. He picked up his wrench from the counter, his movements slower now, deliberate, as though buying himself time before either of us had to face what had just happened. Neither of us spoke at first. The weight of what we'd done hung between us like smoke, impossible to ignore. I wanted to break the silence, to say something that might make sense of it, but no words felt right. Thank you would sound absurd, an apology would sound hollow, and denial was useless. We both knew the truth too clearly. Finally, he cleared his throat and said softly, "The sink should hold for now." His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed him. They lingered on me, conflicted, guilty, and yet unwilling to look away. I nodded, clutching the edge of the counter to ground myself. His words were practical, but they were also a shield, a way to retreat without addressing the storm we had unleashed. I followed him to the door, each step heavy. The house felt changed, as if the walls themselves had absorbed what we had done. When he reached for the handle, he paused, glancing back at me. For a heartbeat, I thought he might say something more, something to explain, to comfort, or to promise. But he didn't. He simply gave me a look, intense, unreadable, and then left. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone with a silence that felt louder than anything else. I pressed my palms against the counter, trying to steady the whirl of emotions. Shame burned hot under my skin, but it was tangled with something I couldn't deny, desire that hadn't faded, that pulsed quietly inside me even now. I hated myself for it, hated that a part of me wanted to replay every moment, to feel it again. The guilt settled deep in my stomach, sharp and unrelenting. I thought of my husband, the man who trusted me, who never once questioned my loyalty. The image of his face made me sick with regret, but it didn't erase what I had allowed. I went upstairs to wash my hands, though no amount of soap could clean away the memory. My reflection in the mirror startled me. Flushed cheeks, wide eyes, a woman I hardly recognized staring back. I looked like someone caught between two lives, one built on promises and another born out of hunger. Hours later, when the house grew dim with evening shadows, I tried to slip back into normalcy. I reheated leftovers, folded laundry, answered a few messages as though nothing had changed. But everything had. Each small routine felt strange, hollow, as though I were moving through the motions of someone else's life. That night, lying in bed beside my husband, I felt the full weight of what I'd done. He slept peacefully, unaware, his hand resting near mine. I stared at the ceiling, heart heavy, knowing I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. My body still remembered James's touch, my lips still remembered his kiss, and the shame of that truth pressed down on me like a secret too dangerous to speak aloud. In the darkness, I realized that what happened would never leave me. It was carved into me, permanent, a choice I could neither take back nor confess. No one would ever know, yet it would haunt me every time I saw him across the driveway, every time my husband looked at me with trust in his eyes. The sink was fixed, yes, but something inside me had cracked wide open, something I could never repair.